OG Rose, and today we're going to be talking about on brainwashing as featured in the map is indestructible, and this will be examining the meaning of a term, just like pieces like on love or talking about like on materialism or on forgiveness, really trying to isolate. I'm trying to isolate the meaning of a term because if it's a simile, if love and like are the same, then why use the word love? It could just cause confusion. So likewise, we're trying to isolate the function and meaning of the word brainwashing. And I think it has a very unclear meaning, distinct from, say, learning or changing view. And it tends to be subjective. It tends to be kind of a subjective debasing of someone who begins to change their views into something we don't like. And you see, the issue is if you say someone is brainwashed, then that would automatically sort of suggest that you know the truth or that you know they are brainwashed. And that, what are the chances of us actually knowing the truth to know that they're brainwashed? It's, we don't mean to say that there are no cases where people are taught something false. But you see, here's the issue. What's the difference between being brainwashed and simply learning something incorrect? And if when we say that someone is brainwashed, we mean that they've learned something false, well, how's that any different from just learning something false, right? I mean, a lot of people accidentally share ideas that are incorrect, or they spread what they think is a fact that turns out not to be a fact, and so on and so forth. So what's the difference between brainwashing and, say, teaching a mistake? And I think we have to start suggesting that brainwashing means an intentional effort to deceive, where, say, you know the truth, but you're trying to brainwash people from it, to not know the truth, or to think what you believe is true that you haven't examined. It's just kind of your cult, right? And it seems like the word brainwashing, if it simply is going to be distinct from teaching a falsity, must mean some kind of intention. Now, here's the thing. If someone is brainwashed, then telling them they're brainwashed is probably not going to work. And in fact, they might resent it. And furthermore, if someone is intentionally brainwashing other people, they know they are. And so telling them they're brainwashing is probably not going to do much. In fact, they would basically have to be an evil person at this point, right? But you see, right now, right when you say all that, it would seem that the term brainwashing is probably not what describes most circumstances, if any. Well, very rarely. I don't mean to say there aren't evil people in the world, or depends on what we mean by that term. I think it's, St. Augustine makes it clear that there's no such thing as an evil motive. People do what they think is good, but that doesn't mean people can't think something is good that's actually evil, like murder or something, right? But without getting into all that. But the point is that the situations in which the word brainwashing might rightfully or fittingly apply are probably pretty rare. And yet it's a term that I think defines a lot of discourse. Now, please note, it's not very often that people directly say to one another, you're brainwashed. But I do think it as a schema or a kind of construct or a notion is lurking very often when people talk to one another. And this is why I think examining the kind of meaning or trying to figure out the meaning of this term can be important. So if people say to one another, you can't think for yourself, you are too close to the situation to see it clearly, you as whoever you are can't understand things, you're blinded by love, etc., so forth. All of these phrases suggest a subject who is incapable of thinking clearly. And so there's something lurking in them to suggest that you're brainwashed, that you're not able to think clearly. And that's why I think we have to really question this notion, because I do think it lurks in a lot of conversations. But again, the problem is, if you say that to someone, then if they actually are brainwashed, or they're, say, too close to the situation to see it clearly, well, then they're probably not able to see that what you're saying is correct. So it's probably going to cause resentment. So we just have to also ask, what is the effectiveness of, practically, what is the effectiveness of talking about brainwashing or anything that would suggest that phrase? Well, I think it's very low. And I think also, a lot of the map is indestructible is ultimately going to argue that we need to focus on conditions of possibility, dwelling, being with people, as opposed to trying to get them to change their position through direct opposition, ultimately because the map of ideology is indestructible. And I think any sort of construct of brainwashing is particularly problematic. I mean, in a way, all learning is brainwashing, right? You're washing the brain of falsity, you're washing away ignorance, you're cleaning the brain to be more true in a way. So what is it? So again, if we're talking about brainwashing in a negative way, it would seem like it has something to do with intentional and conscious teaching of falsity. Well, here's the thing. If what's actually going on is that often people are just incorrectly teaching one another, but we accuse them of brainwashing, well, they're probably going to dismiss us, or they're not going to listen to us, or they're going to be hurt. And this is probably going to shut down any possibility of creating new conditions of possibility by which the individuals might have their minds changed or changed how they think, right? So it seems to be a very counterintuitive notion. Also, if we think of ourselves as brainwashed, that could drive us crazy, because then we can't judge reality. Like, how do we judge it correctly? How do we even know if what we're thinking is true or not? Also, too, if we allow ourselves to think of other people as brainwashed or ideological, then we kind of other them, and we don't have to take their views as seriously. We don't have to investigate them. We don't have to think about them. And, this paper is going to also suggest that we really even shouldn't think of others as brainwashed, even if we don't directly call them brainwashed. It's problematic to even think to ourselves that they're brainwashed, because there's a kind of dismissal that occurs there. And again, they're probably like, if everyone is in a sense brainwashed, because everyone has learned things, they've had their brain cleansed. And if you think they're brainwashed, then you're making it where you're not responsible to speak with them, or they're hopeless. They're lost, right? And I guess I also question, what's the point of learning things? Well, let's put it this way. If we tend to think of everyone who thinks differently than us as brainwashed to some degree in some way, then basically the only way to get people to change their views is power and dominance, and that seems very dangerous. Brainwashing as a construct seems very, very antithetical to democracy. And I think it creates power dynamics and paranoia and all sorts of great problems. And so I would greatly advise removing this construct. I don't think it's constructive. I don't see what it does. If it applies, it's probably extremely rare circumstances. And it also just removes from us responsibility to take seriously other people. And furthermore, we tend to also become, if you will, brainwasher spotters. We can spot the people that are brainwashed or manipulated or ideologues. And that creates a kind of power dynamic where we're not equals with them. We're above them. And that seems very problematic. So for more about OG Rose, please visit ogrose.com, Twitter, Anchor, Instagram for the full piece on brainwashing. Please check out Substack and Medium. And please visit Amazon for our books. You can find the recently released Belonging Again 2.1. And thank you so much for your time.